All right, what is good, ladies and gentlemen, is the Master Reviewer back again with another review, and today we're doing a review for How to Train Your Dragon 2. Is the sequel to the original film, and I'll give a bit of background before I begin. I really loved this film as a kid. I think this was one of my most rewatched animated films around the time that it came out. My family, I've mentioned in the past that my family had a car that could play DVDs, and so this one was on repeat a lot in our cars, so I definitely watched this one from the trilogy. This one I watched the most definitely as a kid, and I liked it when I was a kid, and I can happily say that on rewatch it was about as good as I remember it being. And so with that said, let us just begin, starting off with the plot. So the plot of this film is that now, after the events of the first film, all of Berk, they are living at peace with dragons. Everyone, the Vikings of Berk, have incorporated dragons into their daily lives, and in the meantime, Hiccup, he is exploring the world now with Toothless. Now that they have access to dragons, the Hiccup wants to just explore the lands basically and find new dragons, uncover mysteries and stuff like that. So while he is doing so, he happens to come across these dragon trappers, and then he finds out that there is a plot by a man named Drago Bloodfist, who is trying to capture dragons in order to create an army that he can use in order to take over the world, basically. Like, he claims it's, later on in the film, he will claim that it's because it's in order to make sure that, like, I don't know, he has like a motive of how his town when he was younger, it like burned down because of dragons and stuff. So he does, in order to conquer like the fear of dragons, he wants to control dragons, and then Hiccup basically tells him like, no, you're actually just doing this to control humans, and so he doesn't like deny it basically. So his whole goal is basically just he's power hungry and he wants to control people. So yeah, anyway, so you have Hiccup along with Astrid. I think initially their plan is to go along and get captured by Erit, son of Erit. He is the leader of the dragon trappers, and so Hiccup allows himself to get captured. Astrid goes along with him, but then during when he's trying to do that, some other dragon riders, like a lot of the teenagers from the last film, as well as Stoic and Gobber, they end up arriving on the scene and ruining Hiccup's plan, I guess. And so instead, what happens is that so yeah, there's a kind of this is at this point, I think this is when Hiccup finds out like the whole backstory of Stoic, how Stoic knew about Drago Bloodfist from the past, because Drago tried to get all the chiefs of like different villages to pledge loyalty to him basically, and he will protect them from dragons, as happened in the past. And when they didn't cooperate, then Drago used dragons to kill them all except for Stoic, who got away. So Hiccup at that point ends up finding out about that, and then he ends up still saying like, no, I'm still going to try to change his mind about like going to war and stuff. And so Hiccup goes off on his own, and this is where he meets a strange figure. And it was mentioned earlier by Erit that there was a dragon rider that was freeing the dragons that the trappers were trying to trap. So this is the dragon freer. This is who Hiccup ends up meeting, and then he finds out that it's actually his mother who disappeared 20 years ago. So that is, yeah, so a lot of the rest of the film is now Hiccup is bonding with his mother, like just doing dragon stuff or whatnot, and then eventually Stoic ends up arriving along with Gobber, and there's this fantastic reunion scene with Stoic and the mother, followed by a very sweet, nice dance sequence, and so that was great. But at this point, well, I forgot to mention, but there was also, while this was happening, the teenagers, along with Erit, they investigate Drago's ship, basically his armada that he is planning to build. So they kind of, they're just doing some reconnaissance, but then they end up getting captured, but then they end up escaping, and so now they are on their way to stop. So they end up leaving, and at this point, Drago ends up sending his armada to go after the Alpha. His ultimate goal is to like defeat the Alpha, which is the king of the dragons in the place that Hiccup's mother has been staying for 20 years. And so now at this point Drago arrives to the scene, and a war basically goes down between Drago's army with his Alpha dragon versus the other dragons that are in the dragons that are like the good dragons, basically, along with the good Alpha and Hiccup and his family and his friends, all of them. So a war goes down, and I'll be honest, it probably would have been pretty one-sided if the dragons were actually willing to kill the humans. I was thinking about this, like, okay, they have firepower on this side, so this should feel very easy, but obviously it's a kid's movie. They're not just going to have dragons blasting people with fire. So yeah, it did end up, just because the dragons, I guess, were like morally bound to not use fire, I guess, because they couldn't just be killing all those Vikings. So they ended up, the dragons ended up being on the losing end of things. And so anyway, some stuff happens during the battle, but then ultimately culminates in Drago in a 1v1 with... There's a 1v1 between Drago and Stoic, and then eventually Stoic has to go save Valka. Valka, by the way, is the name of Hiccup's mother. So Stoic goes to save Valka, who gets targeted by the Alpha, and then Drago uses the Alpha to control Toothless in order to attack Hiccup, but then Stoic shows up at the last moment in order to save Hiccup, and so Stoic ends up sacrificing himself, basically. So Stoic dies, and Hiccup gets momentarily upset with Toothless, and so Drago uses it as an opportunity to take Toothless for himself, and so then he leaves. He decides not to finish them off for some reason, I guess because he's so arrogant in his power that he doesn't think he needs to finish them off. So at this point, yeah, there's a funeral for Stoic. It was another nice scene, I would say. And then finally Hiccup comes up with a plan. Like there's another kind of chat, like similar to the last film, where everything seemed hopeless, and then Astrid gave like a little pep talk to Hiccup. There's another one between Hiccup and his mother, and so this motivates Hiccup to continue fighting on, and so he comes up with a plan that basically, it's mentioned earlier that the Alpha can control all dragons except for baby dragons, because baby dragons just don't listen to anyone. So they use the baby dragons in order to make it back to Berk, and then while they're at Berk, Hiccup, he manages to snap Toothless out of his mind control, and Drago, once again, he's like just so arrogant in his power that he even like he lets Hiccup do this. He's like, oh, no one can stop the Alpha's control, but try Dragon Master, and so he just lets him go through with it. But so yeah, that was not Drago's not really the smartest villain, to be honest. But anyway, so at this point, Hiccup and Toothless, they are reunited now, and they are working together along with the other teen Vikings in order to stop the Alpha. And their big plan is, I guess, I think their ultimate plan, I'm trying to remember like exactly what the plan was. I think the plan was, I don't remember, they had like a specific plan, but I don't remember what it was. Eventually, like I think Toothless I think he was like avoiding the Alpha at first, but then at some point he just started like blasting the Alpha in order to like stop the mind control. But I'm going to check real quick just to refresh my memory. Okay, my internet isn't working great at the moment, so I couldn't check. But in short, like he at first tried to like dodge the Alpha for some reason, but eventually it did end up with Toothless did start blasting the Alpha in order to stop the mind control of the Alpha on the other dragons, and then eventually the Alpha does manage to blast one of like the Alpha dragons they're called like bewilder beasts, and they're able to blast giant ice shards basically, which are, I guess, very lethal. So Toothless and Hiccup, they do get blasted by one of those ice blasts, but then this is when Toothless unlocks his like, I don't know what to call it, fury mode, alpha state, something like that. So yeah, Toothless unlocks this new state of his where he is just apparently a lot stronger. He's like glowing a bit blue, and so at this point he does start he's basically challenging the Alpha, and so this does get he starts blasting the Alpha, and so the mind control starts wearing off because everyone is all the other dragons are kind of viewing Toothless now as the Alpha, and so they all start siding with him, and basically the climax is basically all the dragons are shooting the Alpha in order to defeat him, and eventually, I think they don't really show exactly what happens to Drago, but eventually, like they show he gets his arm blasted off, and then they show eventually the Alpha just leaves, and so I'm assuming Drago would have drowned or something like that. So I don't really know what happened to him, but yeah, the day is saved, everyone is happy, and so well, I mean, as happy as you can be after Stoic died and all that, but yeah, it ends with Hiccup becoming the new chief of the village, and then a final, at the start and end of each of these films, it's like always Hiccup narrating like about Berk, like, oh, this is Berk. Other places they do, I don't know, knitting or sewing or whatever, we're dragon riders, no one can defeat us, and yeah, just a small little narration for Hiccup to end things off, and that is where the film ends. And so overall, I would give the plot, I think I like this plot a lot. I don't know if I like it as much as the first film. I think the first film's plot just felt a little tighter, I would say. Like a bit more like well structured, where this film, it's like it does feel like a lot of the start, maybe it has a bit of pacing issues where it's like the first half, it does feel like just a lot of, I don't know, Hiccup bonding with his mother and stuff, and also just like waiting for it gets to, I think like more than half of the film goes by before we're actually introduced to Drago, which I guess it's good. It like builds up it like kind of hypes him up a bit. But overall, the plot, I'm thinking of whether I should say a 4 to 5 or a 5 to 5. I don't know if I loved it, but I do definitely like it. I would say I'm gonna be a bit harsh with that. I'm gonna give it a 4 to 5. I would say I like the plot, and yeah, but I think that the first film's plot was maybe just slightly, I don't know, they're either as good or the first films was like slightly better, I would say. So I'm just going to be harsh with them. I'm going to give the plot a 4 to 5. In terms of the characters, I still think all the characters are great. I think that Hiccup still a good lead as usual. He doesn't really have as much of an arc this movie, where in the last film he did go from like wanting to kill dragons, and then ultimately has to change the minds of everyone in Berk about dragons. This film, it's just his whole thing is that I'm going to convince Drago to not go to war with us, but that doesn't even end up working out at the end. He does realize that like Drago is just hell bent on war no matter what. So anyway, besides him, I think Stoic is fantastic in this film. I like Stoic more in this film compared to the last one because he's actually a bit more reasonable in this film, and he has some good moments with Valka. I think Valka, she is also a nice addition of the cast of characters of Hiccup's mother. I think that it's nice that we like, you know, lore expansion of the world and like of the characters and stuff, so that is cool. Bogger, he is still good. The right-hand man of Stoic. There is Astrid, I think that she is good as well. The other teenage Vikings, they're not as good, I would say, in this film as the last one, because this film, the whole thing with them just feels like, I think, Snotlout and Fishlegs, they are in love with Roughnut, and then Roughnut is just in love with Erit, and so that's just the only thing going on with them, so it's just not as interesting as the last film, where, I don't know, they tried to maybe focus a bit more on the comedy aspect with them, so I would say, but overall, the character, Drago Bloodfist, I think that he is a good, intimidating villain. It does feel like he has a lot of opportunities to just win, and because he's just very cocky, he does end up leading to opportunities for the heroes to end up coming out on top. Like, he just lets Hiccup take control of Toothless again, like snap him out of the mind control. He has an opportunity also after Stoic got killed. He could just finish off the rest of them, but he decides not to. So just, yeah. Overall, I would still give the characters, though. I'm going to say an 8 out of 10. I would say great characters. I do Toothless as well. Toothless is great. All the other dragons, I would say, these are some great characters that I still like a lot. So in terms of these settings, you don't have Berk as much in this film because most of it takes place outside of Berk, but you do have the ice castle area that is the base of like all the Alpha Dragon and all the rest of the dragons that Valka is protecting them at. There is the Armada area with Drago's Armada, and besides that, there's like just some ice, a lot of ice areas. Basically, this film that's just has like a ice aesthetic to the whole thing. And I would say the settings are, I would say, pretty good. I would say like a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think that it all works. It gives like a nice kind of not war vibe really, but it definitely feels like Viking-esque, I would say, like maybe even a bit more so than the last film, because it's like, you know, there is just a lot more snow and stuff, so I think it's a good aesthetic for the film. In terms of the visuals, it does look noticeably better, definitely like Hiccup does look much different than he did in the last film, where the last film he was like a scrawny, kind of very weak kind of character and stuff, and this film he has like a completely new suit that looks great, fantastic, I would say. In the last film he was wearing just like a vest, I think, and it's just very basic clothing. This film he actually has like a whole outfit and stuff that looks very fire, I would say. Besides him, the other, there's like a bit of it. I mean, this film came out like I think 4 years after the original one, so it's not like noticeably much greater, but it is definitely, you know, a slight improvement, which is always appreciated, I guess, in terms of the visual department. The actual action sequences, I do think, look better probably because there is just a lot more dragon on dragon action with like a lot more fire blasts being used. The ice dragons with their ice blasts and stuff, it does look very cool. There is the sword that Hiccup ends up using that is able to, it's like based off that one dragon that releases the gas, and then the other one like ignites it. So I think that was a pretty cool visual. All the visuals with Valka before she takes off her mask, I think, are very, very good. It's like when they're flying in the air and stuff. Hiccup and Toothless, when they're first introduced to Valka, I think that intro sequence was just great. So yeah, a lot of great visuals in this film. I would give the visuals probably I'm thinking a 7.5. I'm going to say very good visuals, I would say. In terms of the worst thing, I think the worst thing is, I don't really have a worst thing in mind. Maybe just, again, like the pacing at times. It does feel like, okay, we're spending maybe a bit too much time on just like the bonding between Valka and Hiccup, and I did want to kind of, I don't know about the pacing. It was, I don't like using pacing as the worst thing in general, because I don't really know what constitutes as bad pacing. Bad pacing, I guess, is when you think like, okay, this is taking too long, or this is going by too quickly, or something like that. So I'm not the best at determining what is considered good or bad pacing. So I don't really like using the pacing, but I will say probably the worst thing was, I don't know, maybe the middle section where it's like there's just like bonding going on. But even the bonding scenes, it's like they're good scenes. It's just, I don't know. I'll say the pacing was, I'll just give the pacing like a 5.5. I'll say it was decent pacing. It was like, it didn't feel too long or too short or anything. No scenes felt like they dragged on too much, but like the middle section again with the bonding between just Hiccup and like once Stoic comes in, it is nice to see the bonding between Stoic and like the whole family bonding. But just when it's just Hiccup and Valka, it's like maybe there's a bit too, I don't know, I just would have liked those scenes to be a bit shorter to get onto some more interesting stuff, I guess. So in terms of the best thing, I would say the best thing is probably, I'll just reuse, I guess, the best score, which was the plots, which I gave a 4 to 5. I also gave the characters an 8 out of 10, which would just they'd be equal. So I'll just go a 4 to 5 / 8 out of 10 for the best score, I guess, because, yeah, the characters and the plot are just, once again, great, I would say. So, yeah, let me see here before I do the calculations any extra notes that I have. I mentioned the reunion and song scene between Stoic and Valka. That was fantastic. All the intro sequence with Valka, like when she's first introduced, I think that was also very good. The music in this film in general, I think, is way better. Like, I think the first film had good music. I think this film, though, like they had like an orchestra sequence, but with the scene where it's like we're first introduced to the dragon trappers and stuff. And just this song had like there was another song in this film. It was like "We Go Where No One Goes." That song, that was a pretty good song as well. So the music in this film, props to the music, definitely. There was one scene in particular, the scene where it's like Hiccup did end up leaving Burke, like while Stoic told everyone to like shut the gates and stuff. And so Hiccup leaves, and I was like, okay, he left. Then Astrid went after him, and then they showed literally the entire gate close, but then Astrid still managed to get out. Like they cut to a different shot where she managed to escape, and it was just an example of the incorrect timing / spatial trope that I just noticed that kind of ticked me off a bit. But that's just nitpicking stuff, doesn't really affect the film in any way. So. Yeah, anyway, that is all of the notes. So I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. All right, so it ends up coming out to about a 7.5, but I would definitely give this a lot higher than that. I think I would give this, honestly, like between another 8.5 to a 9, I would say, similar to, I think, what I gave the last film. I don't think I gave a concrete score on the last film. I think this film, I would say, about as good as the first film, if not slightly worse. So I think I'm just going to call it, I think I'm going to call it like an 8.5, I'm going to say. I think that this film was amazing, and yeah, this was just another, I think this trilogy, honestly, this is I think this might be my favorite franchise in DreamWorks, I'm going to be honest. So the third film, it's interesting because I did watch it, I think, part of it, but for some reason I watched it in Russian. I don't know why. It's like I had the option to watch it in English, but it was late at night, and I was like, I think I was with my sister, and we were just checking for something to see. But it was like at the time, I don't know, I think she was doing something else at the time. I was also doing something else. We were just like, we wanted something on in the background. So we were like, let's put How to Train Your Dragon on, How to Train Your Dragon 3 on. And I was like, you want to see it in Russian? And she was like, sure. And so I don't know why we did that at all. But so I know like most of the third film is going to be like a first time for me because I saw like half of it maybe. And the half I saw it in, it was in Russian. So I didn't really understand anything that was going on. So. But anyway, that's for the next video. Overall, I would give this film I would give it an 8.5. I thought it was amazing. And yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments and I'll maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.